Okay, we're starting chapter 3. Starting chapter 3 today. Let's get it. A common view of propaganda is that it is the work of a few evil men, seducers of the people, cheats, and authoritarian rulers who want to dominate a population. That it is the handmaiden of more or less illegitimate powers. This view always thinks of propaganda as being made voluntarily. It assumes that a man decides to make propaganda, that a government establishes a propaganda ministry, and that things just develop from there on. According to this view, the public is just an object, a passive crowd that one can manipulate, influence, and use. And this notion is held not only by those who think one can manipulate the crowds, but also by those who think propaganda is not very effective and can be resisted easily. In other words, this view distinguishes between an active factor, the propagandist, and a passive factor, the crowd, the mass man. According to this conception, propaganda is a sinister invention of the military caste, whereas actually it is the expression of modern society as a whole. Seen from that angle, it is easy to understand the moralist's hostility to propaganda. Man is the innocent victim pushed into evil ways by the propagandist. The propagandee is entirely without blame because he has been fooled and has fallen into a trap. The militant Nazi and communist are just poor victims who must not be fought but must be psychologically liberated from that trap, readapted to freedom, and shown the truth. In any event, the propagandee is seen in the role of the poor devil who cannot help himself, who has no means of defense against the bird of prey who can swoop down on him from the skies. A similar point of view can be found in studies on advertising, which regard the buyer as a victim and prey. In all this, the propagandee is never charged with the slightest responsibility for the phenomenon regarded as originated entirely outside of himself. Let me check my volume levels real quick. Okay. This view seems to me completely wrong. A simple fact should lead us, at least, to question it. Nowadays, propaganda pervades all aspects of public life. We know that the psychological factor, which includes encirclement, integration into a group, and participation in action, in addition to personal conviction, is decisive. To draw up plans for an organization, a system of work, political methods, and institutions is not enough. The individual must participate in all this from the bottom of his heart with pleasure and deep satisfaction. If the common market is wanted, a unit must be set up to psychologically prepare the people for the common market. This is absolutely necessary because the institution means nothing by themselves. NATO also needs propaganda for its members. Gasperi's proposal in 1956 to create a Dem form that would correspond to the common form is extremely significant. Present political warfare is very inadequate from the economic point of view. One may well say that the recession was much more a psychological than a technical economic development. In order to assure that reforms will have vigor and effectiveness, one must first convince the people that no recession has occurred and that they have nothing to fear. And this is not just Dr. Koh's method of self-implantation, but active participation in an effective recovery. As early as 1928, Edward Bernays stated, "Propaganda is the modern instrument by which intelligent men can fight for productive ends and help to bring order out of chaos." A specific example, agricultural reconstruction in France, is first of all a psychological problem. Services of popularization are created which furnish not only technical consultants, but primarily psychological agitators, on the pattern of the famous county agents in the United States or the counselors in Scandinavia. Efforts at popularizing and instilling convictions take place simultaneously. The USSR is still much more advanced in the direction of full-fledged agricultural propaganda, with technically perfect propaganda campaigns at harvest time, hundreds of thousands of propaganda agents roaming through the villages expostulating motherland and production, radio broadcasts and films, and daily publication of harvest results as in a pennant race. Joining in this campaign are the local papers, the Komsomols, the Teamsters, the festivities, dances, folk songs, rewards, decorations, and citations. The Soviets employ the same methods in factory work, and the formula that best explains the whole effort is: full understanding on the part of the workers is the decisive factor in raising productivity. It is necessary to obtain the worker's allegiance to the cause of productivity. He must accept and search for innovations like his work support. He must accept and search for innovations like his work, support his organization, understand the function of labor. All this is attained by psychological manipulation, by a propaganda conducted with precision over a considerable length of time. In armies, such techniques are of equal importance. The best example is the new German army. The German soldier must be convinced of the validity of what he defends, and patriotism is no longer territorial but ideological. This psychological approach is designed to give the soldiers a personal discipline with a capacity for decision and choice. Military techniques are no longer sufficient. All this is pure propaganda, including the notion of the personal decision. For as soon as the individual has been indoctrinated with the truth, he will act as he is expected to act from the spontaneity of his conscience. This was the principal aim of propaganda in Hitler's army. The individual German soldier's capacity for personal initiative in 1940 was truly remarkable. One final example in a different field. In connection with the 1959 census in the USSR, a gigantic propaganda campaign was unleashed, because both the speed with which such a census can be taken and the accuracy of the results depend on the goodwill and truthfulness of the citizens. So in order to obtain speed and accuracy, opinion was mobilized. The entire press and all mass organizations sprang into action in order to envelop the citizens in propaganda, and propagandists roamed the country far and wide to explain to the people what was being planned, to alleviate their prejudices and suspicions with regard to the questions that they would be asked. These are all examples of entirely different applications of propaganda, but in order for propaganda to be so far-ranging, it must correspond to a need. The state has that need. Propaganda obviously is a necessary instrument for the state and the authorities. But while this fact may dispel the concept of propagandist, of the propagandist as simply an evildoer, it still leaves the idea of propaganda as an active power versus passive masses. And we insist that this idea, too, must be dispelled. For propaganda to succeed, it must correspond to a need for propaganda on the individual's part. One can lead a horse to water, but cannot make him drink. One cannot reach through propaganda those who do not need what it offers. The propagandee is by no means just an innocent victim. He provokes the psychological action of propaganda, and not merely lends himself to it, but even desires satisfaction from it. Without this previous implicit consent, without this need for propaganda experienced by practically every citizen of the technological age, propaganda could not spread. There is not just a wicked propagandist at work who sets up means to ensnare the innocent citizen. Rather, there is a citizen who craves propaganda from the bottom of his being, and a propagandist who responds to this craving. Propagandists would not exist without potential propagandees to begin with. To understand that propaganda is not just a deliberate and more or less arbitrary creation by some people in power is therefore essential. It is a strictly sociological phenomenon in the sense that it has its roots and reasons in the need of the group that will sustain it. We are thus face to face with a dual need: the need on the part of regimes to make propaganda, and the need of the propagandee. These two conditions correspond to and complement each other in the development of propaganda. We are not innocent victims of propaganda. We are we have to take responsibility. I like that. Everyone wants, in our modern society, everyone wants to avoid responsibility and blame other people for their problems, and that is a terrible philosophy because you get nowhere blaming other people, and only when you take responsibility can you actually change and get better. The state's necessity. The dilemma of the modern state. Propaganda is needed in the exercise of power for the simple reason that the masses have come to participate in political affairs. Let us not call this democracy. This is only one aspect of it. To begin with, there is no concrete reality of masses. In a sparsely populated country, politics can be made by small groups, separated from each other and from the masses, which will not form a public opinion and are remote from the centers of power. The nearness of the masses to the seats of power is very important. Pericles and Tiberius were well aware of it, as were Louis XIV and Napoleon. They instilled themselves in the countryside, far from the crowds, in order to govern in peace outside the reach of pressure of the masses, which, even without clearly wanting to, affect the conditions of power by their mere proximity. This simple fact explains why politics can no longer be the game of princes and diplomats, and why palace revolutions have been replaced by popular revolutions. Nowadays, the ruler can no longer detach himself from the masses and conduct a more or less secret policy. He no longer has an ivory tower, and everywhere he is confronted with this multiple presence. He cannot escape the mass simply because of the present population density. The mass is everywhere. Moreover, as a result of the modern means of transportation, the government is not only in constant contact with the population of the capital, but also with the entire country. In their relations with governing powers, there is hardly any difference now between the population of the capital and that of the countryside. This physical proximity is itself a political factor. Moreover, the mass knows its rulers through the press, radio, and TV. The chief of state is in contact with the people. He can no longer prevent people from knowing a certain number of political facts. This development is not the result of some applied doctrine. It is not because democratic doctrine demands the masses' participation in public power that this relationship between mass and government has developed. It is a simple fact and the inevitable result of demographic changes. Hence, If the ruler wants to play the game by himself and follow secret policies, he must present a decoy to the masses. He cannot escape the mass, but he can draw between himself and that mass an invisible curtain, a screen, on which the mass will see a projected image, or projected the mirage of some politics, while the real politics are being made behind it. Except for this subterfuge, the government is in fact under the control of the people, not juridical control, but the kind of control that stems from the simple fact that the people are interested in politics and try to keep up with and understand governmental action, as well as make their opinions known. For after all, the masses are interested in politics. There's a footnote. Democracy rests on the conviction that the citizen can choose the right man and the right policy. Because this is not exactly the case, the crowd is propagandized in order to make it participate. Under such conditions, how could the mass not be convinced that it is deeply concerned? Okay, so the mass is interested in politics. This too is new. Even those who do not read the papers carefully are appalled at the thought of censorship, particularly when they feel that the government wants to hide something and leave them in the dark. Although now it seems like people accept censorship. So has that been a socially engineered change? Nowadays, the masses are accustomed to making political judgments. As the result of the democratic process, they are accustomed to being consulted on political alternatives and to receive political information. This may only be a habit, but it is deeply ingrained by now. To try to reverse it would immediately provoke feelings of frustration and cries of injustice. That the masses are interested in politics, whether deeply or superficially, is a fact. Besides, one very simple reason explains this. Today, as never before in history, political decisions affect everybody. In the old days, a war affected a small number of soldiers and a negligible piece of territory. Today, everybody is a soldier, and the entire population and the whole territory of a nation are involved. Therefore, everybody wants to have his say on the subject of war and peace. Similarly, taxes have increased at least tenfold since the 17th century, and those who pay them naturally want some control over their use. The sacrifices demanded by political life keep increasing and affect everybody. Therefore, everybody wants to participate in this game, which affects him directly. Because the state's decisions will affect me, I intend to influence them. As a result, governments can no longer govern without the masses, without their influence, presence, knowledge, and pressure. But how, then, can they govern? The rule of public opinion is regarded as a simple and natural fact. The government is regarded as the product of this opinion from which it draws its strength. It expresses public opinion, to quote Napoleon's famous words, "Power is based on opinion. What is a government not supported by opinion? Nothing." Theoretically, democracy is a political expression of mass opinion. Most people consider it simple to translate this opinion into action and consider it legitimate that the government should bend to the popular will. Unfortunately, in reality, all this is much less clear and not so simple. More and more, we know, for example, that public opinion does not express itself at the polls and is a long way from expressing itself clearly in political trends. We know, too, that public opinion is very unstable, fluctuating, never settled. Furthermore, this opinion is irrational and develops in unforeseeable fashion. It is by no means composed of a majority of rational decisions in the face of political problems, as some simplistic vision would have it. The majority vote is by no means the real public opinion. Its basically irrational character greatly reduces its basically irrational character greatly reduces its power to rule a democracy. Democracy is based on the concept that man is rational and capable of seeing clearly what is in his own interests, but the study of public opinion suggests this is a highly doubtful proposition. And the bearer of public opinion is generally a masked man, psychologically speaking, which makes him quite unsuited to properly exercise his right of citizenship. This leads us to the following consideration. On the one hand, the government can no longer operate outside the pressure of the masses and public opinion. On the other hand, public opinion does not express itself in democratic form of government. To be sure, the government must know and constantly probe public opinion. The modern state must constantly undertake press and opinion surveys and sound out public opinion in a variety of other ways. But the fundamental question is, does the state then obey and express and follow that opinion? Our unequivocal answer is that even in a democratic state, it does not. Such such I don't know how to pronounce this word. What's up, Wildheart? I didn't even know you timed me out. Where did you time me out? I don't even know. If you time me out, do you do that so I type the N-word in the chat? You just want to see me type the N-word? Is that what's going on? Okay, what's this word? OBEI.
Obeisance.
Obeisance. Right. Such obeisance by the state. What does obeisance mean? Respect? Deferential respect? What is deferential respect? The fuck does deferential mean? It means respect. Difference. Oh, like you're a higher class than me. I got it. Okay, such obeisance by the state to the public opinion. Such obeisance by the state to public opinion is impossible. First, because of the very nature of public opinion, and second, because of the nature of modern political activities. A footnote. The Soviet Union, despite its authoritarian character and the absence of opinion surveys, makes just as much effort to keep informed of public opinion through agitators who inform the government on the people's state of mind and through letters to the press. The government does not consult opinion in order to obey it, however, but to know at what level it exists and determine what propaganda action is needed to win it over. The party must neither anticipate public opinion nor lag behind it. To determine the state's rhyme of action, it must know the masses' state of mind. Holy shit, guys. So, you know, people are like, why do I care if the government spies on me? I'm not breaking any laws. Well, hey, you know, it seems like the more they understand public opinion, the more they can like fuck with us and control us. So something like the internet and social media, which gives them access to our thoughts all the time, and we're constantly expressing our public opinion on our social media, is creating a situation where they understand our public opinion better now than at any time in history, and thus can control us more than any time in history and fuck with us and propagandize us more than any time in history as a result of social media and us giving them our public opinion for free. They don't even need. They used to have agitators spy on us and then report back to the state. They don't even have to do that shit anymore because they have Facebook. They have fucking robots doing that shit. It reflects badly on all trolls. Yeah, I don't want to harm the good name of trolls. Yeah, I don't remember anyways. I do it. Whatever. Where was it that you timed me out? Whatever. It's like people always time me out for no reason too. It's like I'm not even like fucking. I'll just have an opinion that's different, and then they'll just time me out. I don't like your opinion. I'm gonna time you out. Public opinion is so variable and fluctuating that government could never base a course of action on it. No sooner would government begin to pursue certain aims favored in an opinion pool than opinion would turn against it. To the degree that opinion changes are rapid, policy changes would have to be equally rapid. To the extent that opinion is irrational, political action would have to be equally irrational. And as public opinion, ultimately, is always the opinion of incompetence, political decisions would therefore be surrendered to them. Aside from the near impossibility of simply following public opinion, the government has certain functions, particularly those of a technical nature, entirely outside such opinion. With regard to an enterprise that involves billions and lasts for years, it is not a question of following opinion, either at its inception, when opinion is not yet crystallized, or later, when the enterprise has gone too far to turn back. In such matters as French oil policy in the Sahara or electrification in the Soviet Union, public opinion can play no role whatever. The same holds true even where enterprises are being nationalized, regardless of an apparent socialist opinion. In many instances, political decisions must be made to suit new problems emerging precisely from the new political configurations in our age, and such problems do not fit the stereotypes and patterns of established public opinion. Nor can public opinion crystallize overnight, and the government cannot postpone actions and decisions until vague images and myths eventually coalesce into opinion. In the present world of politics, action must at all times be the forerunner of opinion. Even where public opinion is already formed, it can be disastrous to follow it. Recent studies have shown the catastrophic role of public opinion in matters of foreign policy. The masses are incapable of resolving the conflict between morality and the state policy, or of conceiving a long-term foreign policy. They push the government toward a disastrous foreign policy, as in Franklin Roosevelt's policy toward the Soviet Union or Johnson's push-button policy. The greatest danger in connection with foreign policy is that of public opinion manifesting itself in the shape of crisis in an explosion. Obviously, public opinion knows little about foreign affairs and cares less. Torn by contradictory desires, divided on principal questions, it permits the government to conduct whatever foreign policy it deems best. But all at once, for a variety of reasons, opinion converges on one point, temperatures rise, men become excited and assert themselves. For example, on the question of German rearmament. And should this opinion be followed? To the same extent that opinion expresses itself sporadically, that it wells up in fits and starts, it runs counter to the necessary continuity of foreign policy and tends to overturn previous agreements and existing alliances. Because such opinion is intermittent and fragmentary, the government could not follow it even if it wanted to. Shit, man. There's no good place to take a break for a while. Yeah, I'd have to read a lot longer. I think I'm just gonna take a break there. It's about a half hour. I'll take a break there. Pick up tomorrow where I left off. I don't deserve to be timed out for the N-word though.